Unit 4. Focus on Comparison, Contrast. Chapter 10. Asian and African Elephants, Similarities and Differences. It may help you to concentrate on the talk if you close your eyes while you listen. Just relax and listen carefully.
The African and the Asian elephants are the largest land animals in the world. They really are enormous animals. The African and the Asian elephants are alike or similar in many ways, but there are differences between the two types of elephants too. What are some of the similarities between the African and the Asian elephant? Well, for one thing, both animals have long noses called trunks. An elephant sometimes uses its trunk like a third hand. Both kinds of elephants use their trunks to pick up very small objects and very large, heavy objects. They can even pick up trees with their trunks. For another thing, both the African and the Asian elephants have very large ears, although the African elephant's ears are considerably larger. In addition, both animals are intelligent. They can be trained to do heavy work. They can also be trained to do tricks to entertain people. In other words, they both work for people and they entertain people also. As I said before, the African and the Asian elephants are alike in many ways, but they are also quite different too. Let me explain what I mean. The African elephant is larger and heavier than the Asian elephant. The African male elephant weighs between 12,000 and 14,000 pounds. In contrast, the average Asian male elephant weighs between 7,000 and 12,000 pounds. Another major difference between the two kinds of elephants is the size of the ears. Asian elephants have smaller ears than the African elephants do. The teeth are different too. The African elephant has two very large teeth. These teeth are called tusks. The Asian elephant sometimes does not have any tusks at all. The elephants differ in color too. The African elephant is dark gray in color, while the Asian elephant is light gray. Occasionally, an Asian elephant is even white in color. The last big difference between the two elephants is their temperament. The Asian elephant is tamer than the African elephant. In other words, the African elephant is much wilder than the Asian elephant. As a result, it's more difficult to train the African elephant to perform tricks to entertain people. That's why the elephants you see in the circus are probably Asian elephants, not African elephants. Yes, there certainly are differences between the African and the Asian elephants, but there is one big similarity between the two animals. They are both fascinating and enormous animals.
Chapter 11. Lincoln and Kennedy, Similar Destinies. It may help you to concentrate on the talk if you close your eyes while listening. Just relax and listen carefully.
John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln lived in different times and had very different family and educational backgrounds. Kennedy lived in the 20th century. Lincoln lived in the 19th century. Kennedy was born in 1917, whereas Lincoln was born more than 100 years earlier in 1809. As for their family backgrounds, Kennedy came from a rich family, but Lincoln's family was not wealthy. Because Kennedy came from a wealthy family, he was able to attend expensive private schools. He graduated from Harvard University. Lincoln, on the other hand, had only 1 year of formal schooling. In spite of his lack of formal schooling, he became a well-known lawyer. He taught himself law by reading law books. Lincoln was, in other words, a self-educated man. In spite of these differences in Kennedy and Lincoln's backgrounds, some interesting similarities between the two men are evident. In fact, books have been written about the strange coincidences in the lives of these two men. For example, take their political careers. Lincoln began his political career as a congressman. Similarly, Kennedy also began his political career as a congressman. Lincoln was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1847, and Kennedy was elected to the House in 1947, They went to Congress just 100 years apart. Another interesting coincidence is that each man was elected President of the United States in a year ending with the number 60. Lincoln was elected President in 1860, and Kennedy was elected in 1960. Furthermore, both men were president during years of civil unrest in the country. Lincoln was president during the American Civil War. During Kennedy's term of office, civil unrest took the form of civil rights demonstrations. Another striking similarity between the two men was that, as you probably know, neither president lived to complete his term in office. Lincoln and Kennedy were both assassinated while in office. Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas, after only 1,000 days in office. Lincoln was assassinated in 1865, a few days after the end of the American Civil War. It's rather curious to note that both presidents were shot while they were sitting next to their wives. These are only a few examples of the uncanny or unusual similarities in the destinies of these two Americans, men who had a tremendous impact on the social and political life in the United States and the imagination of the American people.
Chapter 12. The Titanic and the Andrea Doria, Tragedies at Sea. If you wish, close your eyes while listening. Just relax and listen carefully.
On the morning of April 10th, 1912, the luxury liner the Titanic left England on a voyage to New York. 4 days later, she lay at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. On Wednesday, July 18th, 1956, the ocean liner the Andrea Doria left Italy. The Andrea Doria was also traveling to New York. 8 days later, this great ship also lay at the bottom of the Atlantic. The sinking of these two huge ships, these two very, very large ships, shocked the world. Reports of these two tragedies filled the newspapers for days. When the Andrea Doria went down, people compared her sinking with the sinking of the Titanic. There were similarities between the two events. However, there were also important differences. What were some of these similarities? First of all, both ships were transatlantic ocean liners. In addition, they were also both luxury liners. They carried many of the world's rich and famous people. In fact, 10 American millionaires lost their lives when the Titanic went down. Today, millions of dollars worth of gold, silver, and cash may still remain locked inside these two sunken ships. Another similarity was that as each ship was sinking, there were acts of heroism and acts of villainy. Some people acted very bravely, even heroically. Some people even gave up their lives so that others could live. There were also some people who acted like cowards. For example, one man on the Titanic dressed up as a woman so that he could get into a lifeboat and save his own life. One last similarity was that both of these ships were considered unsinkable. People believed that they would never sink. I'd like to shift my attention now to the differences between these great ship disasters. To begin with, the Titanic was on her maiden voyage. That is, she was on her very first voyage across the Atlantic. The Andrea Doria, on the other hand, was on her 101st transatlantic crossing. Another difference was that the ships sank for different reasons. The Titanic struck an iceberg, whereas the Andrea Doria collided with another ship. Another contrast was that the Andrea Doria had radar to warn of the approach of another ship, but the Titanic was not equipped with radar. The Titanic only had a lookout. The lookout was able to see the iceberg only moments before the ship struck it. But of course, the greatest difference between these two terrible accidents was the number of lives lost. When the Titanic sank, more than 1,500 people died. They drowned or froze to death in the icy North Atlantic water. Over 700 people survived the sinking of the Titanic. In the Andrea Doria accident, 60 people lost their lives and about 1,650 lives were saved. One of the reasons that so many people died on the Titanic was that the ship was considered to be unsinkable, and so there were about half the number of lifeboats needed to rescue all the people aboard the ship. The Andrea Doria had more than enough lifeboats to rescue every person on the ship. However, they were able to use only about half of the lifeboats they had because of a mechanical problem. The passengers and crew of the Andrea Doria were very lucky that another ship was able to rescue most of them. The passengers on the Titanic were not so fortunate. It's interesting that the wreck of the Titanic was only found in September of 1985. Whenever there are large numbers of people traveling together on a boat, ship, or plane, the possibility of disaster is always present. Most people arrive safely at their destination, but accidents like shipwrecks and plane crashes do happen. And these accidents remind us that no matter how safe we feel, accidents can happen suddenly and unexpectedly.